SQL, or Structured Query Language, has been around since the 1970s, having been initially developed at IBM, with the first commercial distribution by Oracle. So what exactly is it, and is it worth learning? Computing since its earliest days has needed a way to interrogate data, and there have been many proprietary ways to perform such actions. Very large sets of data provide significant challenges to manipulation and reporting of that data. To meet these challenges, the approach initially taken was to store the large volume of data on one site and allow remote terminals to access it. However, this didn't solve the problem of a standardized way of querying the data, regardless of the size or type of that data. So, Structured Query Language was created. The idea was to allow easier access to the data in a central database by using a language that would allow any database to be queried using a common series of commands. Since the late 1950s, a programming language called COBOL was used to allow programs to be run on more than one manufacturer's computer system. SQL also came out of this same mindset, to allow easier access, but this time to data. The databases that hold the valuable data we all use come in a variety of types. However, the query language used to access them, while similar, has syntactical differences. So what are the different types of SQL? Overall, there are 4 main types of SQL, some of which are free to use and others that require purchase. These are Transact SQL, PL SQL, MySQL, and PostgreSQL. Each type has its own set of advantages and disadvantages, and which you choose to use generally depends on the specific needs of your project. So what are the components of a SQL system? Let us look specifically at Transact SQL. First of all, the database. This is a central repository holding all the data and structure of the system. It may run on one or more large computers or servers. Within this database are structured collections called tables. These can be thought of as being like super large spreadsheets with rows and columns, and also having inbuilt rules that define what can be stored in each column. Going beyond simple spreadsheets, tables can be joined together to provide more efficient ways to store and access common data. Queries. These are the standard SQL commands that can be used to interrogate the data within the database, and can be defined as falling into one of these categories: create, read, update, and delete. Constraints. These are the rules defined to maintain the database integrity. For example, to control what can be stored in each column of a table. Stored procedures. These are, as the name suggests, SQL commands that have been saved inside the database, and which can be called by name with parameters. This allows frequently run SQL queries to be optimized in the system, and called either directly by users or by applications. Views. These are stored queries in the database to return specific columns from either one table or a selection of joined tables, with filters on which rows are returned. Like stored procedures, they have names and can be treated like a pseudo table. Security. Database objects like tables, stored procedures, and views can all be permissioned to limit which individual users or groups of users can access them. Users can be limited where needed to only being able to run specific stored procedures or views, with no permission to amend or create new SQL objects. Transactions. There are times when a group of SQL commands needs to be executed, and should any of them fail, you need to roll the database back to how it was before the group of commands was run. This can be done by grouping your commands into a transaction. The SQL system does the hard work for you, leaving you to define the beginning and end of a transaction. So since SQL has been around for many years, is the use of it dying out? SQL databases continue to be one of the most widely used in data management and analysis. Unlike spreadsheets, SQL databases are far more scalable. Should your data volumes grow beyond what simple spreadsheets can cope with, SQL skills are still very much in demand. Is SQL a real programming language? SQL does have a specific syntax and vocabulary, just like other programming languages. However, it is focused on interacting with and manipulating data. It's not a general-purpose language that can be used for a wide selection of tasks. In SQL programming, users request the data from a SQL system without having to define how it is to be retrieved, unlike other programming languages. So how do you learn one of the 4 main SQL systems? Well, YouTube has many tutorials from some very good content creators on the various SQL systems. Copies of the software needed to host your database can be downloaded from the manufacturer's websites. Even expensive SQL systems have free versions. Alternatively, you could look to try one of the SQL in the cloud systems. And of course, there are many online courses available. Just open your favourite browser search engine and type SQL Training Course, and you will be spoiled for choice. There is, of course, always the academic route of college or university degrees to study on a course covering the use of databases and SQL. If you are already working with computers, perhaps there will be opportunities arising to allow you to do SQL coding and learn it from those already either coding in or administering SQL databases. Learning SQL commands is a logical extension to programming in other languages, as at some point in your programming career, the applications you create will need to interact with a SQL database. But that's it for today. Thank you for watching.